also doubts and disappointments, as she had longed for the time when his glory should be revealed. Death had separated her from Joseph, who had shared her knowledge of the mystery of the birth. And now this is where I also was mentioning how Ellen White mentions about Mary being separated from him for a while, and how this order of things, like it mentioned that Jesus constantly returns to Nazareth, as was his custom, but we have this temptation in the wilderness, so we have a gap of what he was doing during this time. But here it says the past 2 months had been very sorrowful, for she had been parted from Jesus, in whose sympathy she found comfort. She pondered upon the words of Simeon, "A sword shall pass through thy own soul also." She recalled the 3 days of agony when she thought Jesus lost to her forever, and with an anxious heart she awaited teaching and preaching. And so this feeling exists within her again, as she hasn't seen Jesus, and Joseph's gone, and so who else can she turn to with this hope and knowledge of Jesus and who he is? So I thought, so even a pastor can be fooled. But anyways, so the next part is that Mary comes to Jesus, and like we said, where there is no wine. We mentioned that Mary is a relative, or she's playing a role within this. We also have her coming to Jesus because she expects Jesus to do something. But he says, like, "Dear woman, why do you involve me? My time has not yet come." This is not being disrespectful. There is no point in which Jesus actually shows up to be. Jesus is shifting. Maybe when he was younger, he called her mother, or he called her mom, or something along that lines, as he recognized in the same spot, and maybe to avoid this concept that Mary is divine or anything like that, they remove her. Like, Jesus stopped where Mary carries any weight. It doesn't show up in. So we have right after that, he says that, like, my time hasn't come. Part of me wonders, like, well, what did he mean by that? What did he mean by my time has not yet come? He's definitely talking at this point when he says my time has not yet come. So his mother, in verse 5, says to the servants, "Do whatever he tells you." So she knows that something will still take place. So she tells them, "Do whatever he says." So in verse 6, it says, "Nearby stood 6 stones." This is, if somebody's drawn a connection to this already, I don't know if you've read Desire of Ages in this section recently, or you just remember it. But think about what Jesus, to pick up jars that are normally used for ceremonial washing, this foot washing process. Here, Jesus tells them to take 30 jars, or to take the 6 jars that they had that could hold 20 to 30 gallons, fill them to the brim with water. Think about this of the banquet. He did not realize where it had come from. So, we have something very profound that's said here. Once the manager has it and he draws it out, he doesn't know where it came from, right? So we mentioned before that Jesus says, "My time has not yet come." Jesus does not get credit for this, right? The man, the really authoritative guest that came, the master of the banquet, does not notice who made this wine or where it came from. He doesn't know that it was water that was turned into wine. Second, he mentions about this utility of the wine, right? People normally bring out the best wine first. They bring out the ones they like the most. They get drunk, and then as they are unable to drink more, or just that savor or flavor that they're enjoying diminishes, they choose worse wine, lesser wine, cheaper wine, just so that the ceremony and the celebration can continue, but it's not as good. And as that enjoyment goes down, people don't really notice. And then you brought out the best wine, like the best wine that they've had all night. Does Jesus' blood become insufficient? That and the local, it says his glory, and his disciples put their faith in him. So the disciples knew what he did. The servants knew what he did. Mary knows what he did. I did want to read this to you. I marked it here, and this is again in the chapter of Desire of Ages. We were mentioning about the symbol, and I just wanted to read this to you. It says, "The gift of Christ to the marriage feast was a symbol. The water represented baptism into his death. The wine, the shedding of his blood for the sins of the world. The water to fill the jars was brought by the way that she put it." Like, yes, but just the way that she says it, like, it's only through Christ that we have the efficacy to nourish our souls. That wine that just like sunk into that guy's, body, and he just felt enriched and just was like, wow, this is great. This is like the best wine I've ever had. That the next part of this goes through, and so let's read it. When he was in the courts, he found men selling cattle, sheep, doves, and others sitting that are part of animal sacrifices. They are all sufficient. They're all clean animals. Into a market, my first thought is like, oh, they turned the temple into like a flea market or but now I notice that these are all ceremonial animals, and it dawned on me like, oh, in order to have makes more sense. And so listen to this. This is in his temples. This is on the first page. Listen to this paragraph. It says, "The dealers demanded exorbitant prices for the animals. Extortion, fraud, all of this was Leviticus, or if you've gone through Exodus. So this shekel, which is mentioned, if you couldn't